A girl has a dream as she is running towards some door. She sees a thin ray of light ahead and tries to catch up with it to finally open the doors. After the girl finally opens the door that was in front of her, she sighs with happiness as the light fills everything around her and the girl can finally relax. She wakes up to the crackling of a wooden carriage. Her dream ended on a happy ending, but it leaves a bad aftertaste. The beautiful girl sits in the carriage and wonders if she fell asleep, even though she was tired. But it was quite difficult to fall asleep in such a situation. The girl is really surprised because today she might die. The girl looks at the palace that brings nothing good except death. The bride doesn't know what to expect from her betrothed. The carriage is on its way to a palace so famous for its bad reputation. A bad reputation also haunts the owner of this castle, famous for its troubled past during the war. The events began a week ago. The Lord flinches at the words of his daughter. She screams hysterically and cries that she would rather be sent to the slums. She will never agree to the master's decision. The girl cries and asks accusingly how the Lord could give her to an aristocrat who would be a commoner. Hasn't the gentleman heard from Sukhov about this horrible man? The man says the lady must know, because it's the king's order, and who knows what he might do if their family refuses. Sometimes aristocrats must obey without objection, for otherwise they may lose their privileges. The backstory of the kingdom of Oswald is very entertaining. It was a rich country that had fertile lands. The now deceased King Duquesne III was a ruthless tyrant who sought only carnal pleasures. He was such a terrible man that he neglected his country and recklessly attacked the women of the palace, whether they were wives or relatives of his servants. The king was truly terrible in his rule. He made bad decisions and ignored his advisors. As a result, the land became barren, and the people's discontent only grew. The people gathered to take revenge on the king who had brought their country to ruin. As a result, the current ruler, Caden, united the people against Duquesne. After fierce battles, both the queen and Prince Eden were killed within the palace walls. As the leader of the resistance, Caden became the new king. It was truly a new hero who began to reform the country. But quickly rebuilding a fallen country would not be easy for even the best ruler. Surprisingly, Caden granted the title of Duke to an ordinary knight who was a hero of the war, and his name was Eli. This knight has been a constant companion to the new king in his battles. In the previous war, Elijah was Caden's right-hand man, and he cut across the battlefield and protected Caden on his right side. Elijah killed anyone who got in their way, no matter if it was a man, woman, child, or old man. His brutality and immense, overwhelming power made enemies and allies alike tremble with fear. He was a truly powerful man, but in his own way, he was terrifying. And now the girl is tearfully outraged that this could have happened because the Lord could have simply buy them off with his fortune, and why should she be the one to sacrifice herself of all the sisters? The girl's name is Anna, and the Lord irritably tells Anna that it's not as simple as she thinks. If Anna knew how their family took Duquesne's side during the war, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they were executed after Eli and Caden seized the throne. But the Lord tells Anna and the other sister that Caden has shown his mercy to them. If they obey his order, then their family will be more comfortable to the king and will be safer. And if they refuse to obey the king's order with such a bad reputation, then they may all be executed. And to make matters worse, the Lord says that none of Anna's sisters are even 10 years old. Of course, as Anna's father, the Lord doesn't want to send her to Eli, but they have no other choice. Anna cries and doesn't know what to say. Her father says that he asks Anna not to refuse and to think about the future of their family, because she is the eldest daughter of the Lord. Anna falls to the floor and smashes her knees. She says how can her father do this to her? After all, he chose to send her to a commoner. She resents that the land is abandoned and the castle. It's not worth that much, and father should put Anne's welfare first even if it costs a fortune. The father flinches. He doesn't want to lose his entire fortune for his daughter's welfare, but he also can't just let his daughter go. The father yells at Anna to shut her mouth and not dare to object anymore because the father needs time to think. The next moment the father hears, he turns around to see a quiet maid who makes almost no sound when she is in the room. The master didn't know the maid had been here all this time, and he must keep her silent about this conversation. After all, if the common people find out about their conversation, sooner or later the information about their family's betrayal will reach the ears of the highest circles of the king, and then we can only guess about the punishment and its sophistication. The master also notices that the maid has a very interesting hair color. He notices that the maid's hair is really beautiful and somewhat similar to his daughter's hair. The master has an interesting thought, and with a certain interested look, he tries to make up this deception. The gentleman turns to his daughter, who continues to shake and cry. Anna says she would rather die than marry this commoner. She is not even afraid of death. The father looks at his daughter's hair and realizes he has an interesting idea. The father bares his teeth and smilingly says that they can do what Anna wants to save her. The girl stares at her father in disbelief. They can't believe that their tears could have had any effect, she asks. Does the father seriously mean they won't do as the king ordered? The father says he doesn't want his precious daughter in the hands of a commoner, so he's come up with some plan. If they do it quietly and without any fuss, they will stay fed and alive, and the daughter will stay home and not suffer. The father at one point grabs the maid, who did not expect such behavior from her master. He says he'll give the bloodthirsty Eli the maid, and no one will know the difference. The girls look at each other and cannot believe the master's insidious plot to deceive the king and Eli. The Lord says that the girl will go with her to a convent and there for a week should teach her noble etiquette. And after a week they will put dresses on the maid and send her to Eli. The girl says it's very dangerous if they find out about the deception, then they'll all get their heads blown off. But the father says it'll be all right because their daughter Anna is gravely ill. Even if their plan gets out, they can say they sent the maid with the news and she decided to take advantage of the situation and improve her position. And if she tries to escape or expose them, they'll just kill her. Anna wipes away her tears and turns to her father. She tells her father to let Anna train the maid because there's barely enough time, but Anna will do her best. The girl is really glad she has the chance to save herself. She thinks that a maid might not be a bad thing because she is a commoner and could marry a rich commoner who could become an aristocrat. Meanwhile, the man stands on the wall of his castle and looks unhappily at the arrival of the carriage. Finally, the girl arrives, from which the guy was visibly displeased. The maid remembers how Anna brought her up. The girl screamed that how many times must she be told that a maid named Edna should not be in a hurry. Even a pig is smarter than Edna. The girl was incredibly angry at Edna's behavior. In addition, Anna tells Edna to look around. After all, the Viscount's daughter doesn't pay attention to others and doesn't care what they think. Edna was very frightened because she was not trained as a human, but as a real dog. Anna leans over Edna and tells her to listen to her carefully. For if she misbehaves and Mr. Elias finds out that the girl is a commoner, he will tear her to pieces and decorate the castle walls with her remains. So if Edna wants to live longer, she'll have to do better. Besides, Anna will suffer a similar fate if Edna can't fulfill her duties. Edna realizes that Elijah may be a commoner, but he carries the title of duke. So Edna must dream of becoming a duke's wife. And it's the perfect chance for her to rise from the bottom. Anna says that Edna won't even have to run from the soldiers every night. Edna is clearly embarrassed by her mistress's words. Edna realizes that living here as a maid is like living in hell anyway, and this is her perfect chance to escape from this hellhole. Edna realizes that she must change in order to escape this vicious circle, even if it is only the beginning of a new hell. Edna tries to do everything Anna tells her to do, and Mistress realizes that it looks like Edna has finally come to terms. Anna puts those band-aids on purpose, to look sick, because she can't let that girl ruin everything. Anna thinks a simple maid should be enough for a simpleton like Elijah. Caden orders Anna to go to Eli's only because he's never seen Anna. If he'd only seen her once, he'd understand. Anna is the woman who should be by the king's side, not Eli, who used to be a commoner. At this time, Elijah sighs as a carriage with a girl arrives at his door. He is surprised. Could it be that as soon as Alea joked, Caden immediately decided to send his wife to him? Elijah's surprised he was given a title to the land, and now a wife as well. Most likely, Caden is trying to tie Alea to this land so the boyfriend doesn't go anywhere. Eli continues to watch the carriage approach and realizes that as soon as he sees King Caden, he's going to jump all over him because it's a hassle. Edna is told that they have finally arrived. Edna first responds as a commoner, then tries to change dramatically and turns on her inner aristocrat to get into character. Edna reaches for the carriage door to get out. But the next moment, her hand stops and begins to shake with fear. Edna recalls Anne's words to train her, telling her that a lady should stay in the carriage and it is uncivilized to leave the carriage unaccompanied. Edna stops and realizes she was right. She needs to stay here and wait. Next thing you know, Elijah's standing there, waiting for the girl to come out. He doesn't understand why the girl is staying in the carriage all this time. Alea next moment guesses that the girl wants him to come and escort her. Alea starts smiling menacingly and asks, "Is it the mistress who wants Alea to do this dirty work?" Edna at this point is nervous and doesn't know when she is supposed to go out. The situation turns out to be quite unpleasant. They are waiting for each other. Edna sees Elijah coming towards her, and the next moment the guy helps Edna out of the carriage. Elijah wonders, was the girl really that tall when he first saw her? For Lady Anne seemed shorter to Elijah the last time he saw her, though his head was a mess then. And then Elijah had been drinking a lot with the king, so Elijah could see the girl poorly. Elijah realizes his mouth is his enemy. Caden's orders were to marry the girl, so there's not much he can do about it. Alea shares with the girl that she must be tired from the road and should take a bath on top of everything else. Alea tells the girl that the ceremony is tomorrow. Edna wonders, is she really going to bathe in a real bathtub now? The boy says that the servants have prepared one for the maids. Elijah shows him where Edna's room is. Then Elijah breaks out of the girl's arms and leaves. Edna goes to take a bath at that time. Meanwhile, Elijah lies in his room and thinks about the girl's scent. She had a mysterious smell because it would be the smell of a woman's skin. While he spent the last 3 years at war, he's forgotten that smell. Lately, Elijah has only smelled blood. Elijah decides to enter the room of his wife. The man closes the door behind him, and a wary Edna is surprised that the master has come to her. She turns around and sees him standing at the door looking at her. Edna asks, "Is Alea really going to watch her take a bath?" But Alea continues to stand at the door and says he has some very important information for the girl. Edna asks how long Elijah is going to stand there. The man smirks and walks across the room. He apologizes and says that he is just an ordinary common man with no manners. Eliah used to be a commoner, and now, even though he's been given a title and lands, he's still a simpleton. He doesn't plan on just standing there, so Elijah tells Edna to just give up and to take off her clothes immediately. Edna starts to shake with fear and says that the Lord before mentioned the ceremony that it won't take place until tomorrow. But really, Edna was expecting this kind of treatment because then why did Anna refuse to go to Elijah? Edna says that Elijah should wait at least 1 day before the ceremony, and then he will have the right to do whatever he wants. Edna realizes that as a wife, she must do what is necessary. Edna tries to explain to Eli that no matter what his roots are, he is now a duke. Edna at least has to have the wedding ceremony first. And Eli's suggestion was too sudden. Elijah smiles menacingly and says, "Let Edna be nice to him because it's quite amusing." Alea says it doesn't matter when they start today or tomorrow. Alea grabs Edna's hand and tells her to undress immediately. After all, he can't take it anymore. Edna tearfully asks the master to let her go. The next moment, Alea confesses to the girl that when he first saw her in the palace, he thought she was quite beautiful. Alea says that when he first saw her, he hoped Anna's body was as beautiful as her face. Edna is amazed. After all, she had never been told before that the master knew what Anna looked like. This changes everything because now if the master can see Edna, it will be easy to find a trick. Now Edna doesn't know what to do, because if Elijah finds out the truth, then everything could change. Now it's up to Edna to decide what's right for Edna, because if the deception is revealed, it seems like a bitter end for the maid. Edna recalls Anna's instruction to the girl that she should know her words just in case. If Elijah discovers the switch, she should tell him. that Anna was too sick to go to him, and her sister is still young. That's why a maid was sent to him. Now Anna says that rumors of her illness have already spread throughout the convent in case Aleya wants to talk to the king. Anna says Elijah will probably be angry with her, but it'll improve her chances of survival. Aleya's hand reaches for the girl, and she admits to the surprised lord that she is not Anna. Eli looks at the maid and realizes that she is not really Anna because he remembers her from previous encounters. Edna realizes that Anna and the Viscount were mistaken in expecting Elijah not to know what Anna's face looks like. Edna confesses everything to Elijah and tells him her real name. Edna reveals that she is a simple maid in Viscount William's house. Edna tells that the Viscount didn't want to deceive the Lord, but Anna is gravely ill, so they sent a maid. Elijah begins to smile and asks, "Did Viscount really not want to deceive him after dressing up a common maid in a wedding dress?" Elijah thinks Edna's words are nonsense, but he can tell that Edna's noble sacrifice will be noticed. Aleya, next moment, takes Edna's face and bends down, saying that it was a bad choice for Edna. The Lord asks what Edna must have heard about the rumors that people are spreading about Elijah. Don't those rumors scare the girl? Edna says that these rumors mean nothing to her and she really had no choice. Edna did as she was ordered and was just captured. Aleya realizes that this woman is pretty calm, even being in this situation with his hand clutching the girl's neck. Aleya realizes that most likely Edna expected this kind of behavior, or she was initially so calm. Aleya lifts Edna's face and asks if she is a virgin. The next moment, Edna blushes at the unexpected question about her virginity. Aleya says that a noble wife for a simple man like him is a no-brainer, but someone like Edna suits him much better. On top of that, Elijah says he likes Edna better than Anna. Edna starts to freak out because this man thinks so much of himself. The girl asks him if she's a virgin. Would Elijah be able to take her? But Elijah keeps laughing and says that Edna's question was inaccurate because she can become his wife or she can become a woman in his bed. So what does Edna want to do? Edna says she can do both. She says she wants to live as long as possible, and there is nothing in this world for her more terrible than death. So Edna looks at Eli with her beautiful yellow topaz eyes. She asks the Lord if he will accept her if she is a virgin, or if he will kill her because of her deception. Edna is really worried because she doesn't know what to expect from this Lord. Elijah says that he doesn't like the girl's tone, but Elijah starts hitting on Edna and says that he likes that kind of thing much more than talking about death. Edna realizes that she will survive and must survive. The next morning, Edna gets out of bed and with a determined look decides to do something. The girl sets to her work, not noticing the pain after last night's intimacy from the rude Duke. Aleya, meanwhile, is left to sleep alone, and when Edna parted the curtains, then the sun rays hit Aleya's face, from which the man wakes up. Elijah curses the man who just did that to him because it's too vivid. It's like Eli wakes up after a good drink and asks who pulled the curtains because he can't sleep. In this bright light, the next moment, Elijah sees that all the things in his room are in their places. Aleya opens the door loudly and doesn't understand how the servants dared to enter his room while he was sleeping naked. Aleya wouldn't dare treat himself that way. Aleya realizes that there are only 3 allowed left in this castle, and these cowards that still haven't learned not to enter his room will take pity. Elijah continues walking through the castle and thinking about that woman, because he didn't think that Edna would really be a virgin. For Eli, it was a small revelation, because she didn't lie to him, which was commendable. Eli had assumed that she was lying, and he had gone too far with that assumption, and treated the girl rather harshly. Elijah blames himself for the evening's behavior, which was rather vulgar for a girl who has never had intimacy. Now Elijah thinks the girl is in her room crying. But in the next moment, Elijah realizes that Edna will come out when she calms down because she must be very upset with him. But suddenly, the Lord finds Edna sweeping through his castle. Aleya is truly amazed that this is happening because now Edna is his mistress, and why should she behave like a maid? Especially Aleya thought that the girl would be crying in her room after mistreating Aleya. Aleya realizes that this woman is truly interesting. Aleya goes down to Edna, who hears his voice and freezes. He says he distinctly remembers being ordered to meet his future wife. But as he sees Eli now, instead of a wife, the Viscount has sent him a new maid. Now Elijah expects Edna to respond to his words since she was supposed to be a mistress, but continue to act like a normal maid. Edna remains silent, and Elijah tries to get through to the girl. He asks, "Is Edna going to go to the wedding ceremony dressed as a maid?" Alea asks for Edna to at least give him something to say back. Edna says that Aliyah was the person who ripped her wedding dress, and Alea sullenly says that yesterday he mentioned something about a wedding dress. He didn't like it. To top it all off, Alea doesn't like the tone Edna is talking with. The girl asks, "What should she do now? Maybe she should stop answering the gentleman altogether." Elijah stops and thinks that yesterday's thought that Edna is turning out to be pretty feisty and mean as a lioness with sharp claws. Alea goes on to say that they should go into town and buy Edna a new dress. Elijah tells her that they have no choice because the girl can't go to the ceremony in a tattered dress, and the one she's wearing is even worse. Edna asks why Eliah cares that he mentioned his decision yesterday. Elijah says a man should always speak up and follow through right away. The girl says it's her problem if he marries her, it would be an insult to the king. Edna sees no reason to risk it for her. After all, if the king finds out about the deception, there could be trouble for many people, not just the Viscount. Elijah says that first of all, he was only joking, that he's marrying Anna because he just liked her looks, and secondly, the king just wants to marry him so Elijah will settle down. Elijah realizes that Caden doesn't care who his wife is. Caden doesn't care if it's Anna or someone else. The king cares about Elijah being involved in the inner workings of his estate. And the last one is that Elijah always keeps his word. After a while, Elijah notices that there's a bruise under his hair. He touches Edna's face and asks, "Was she beaten when she was a maid?" But the girl waves Eli off and says that she wasn't. The master doesn't need to worry about that. Eli doesn't understand why Edna is withholding this information. Is she ashamed of being beaten? Edna starts to blush at Alea's words, and Alea comments that Edna has a lot of pride for a servant girl. Elijah goes on to say that from now on, at least within the walls of this castle, no one will ever lay a finger on Edna, and she will be safe in Eli's care. At that moment, Edna could see Eli's face for the first time. Though she had heard that he was a war hero and a god of death, a bloody killer, and that he was just a cruel man with many names, but his hair was light, like sunlight, and his gray eyes were sharp as blades. To Edna, it seemed that Alea was not interested in anything but his food. Elijah says they should eat first. After all, they have a lot of things to do, so it would be best if they hurry up. Alea tries to get his horses ready to go to town. Edna asks, "Are they going to go by horse and not by wagon?" Elijah says Edna's right, and the girl's embarrassed too, that she's never been on a horse with someone before. Elijah notices that Edna is reacting strangely and thinks the girl seems agitated. Alea apologizes that it's not a carriage because the girl is probably disappointed that there's no Konyukov castle here. Edna blushes even more and says she doesn't mean it. Elijah sees Edna's changes and the girl doesn't understand. Is Alea just messing with her now? She doesn't understand why he abruptly freezes and stands there without saying anything. Alea holds out her hand to Edna. They are ready to go now, so we have to hurry. Edna hops on the horse to Alea and they get close enough. Edna realizes that the man helped her get on, and it was very elegant of him. She is a little embarrassed and thanks Eli for being so manly and kind to her. Eli is a little embarrassed and decides he needs to hurry up and move on. Edna realizes that this was unexpected and she didn't know Elijah would help her. Alea didn't mess with Edna, and she didn't expect all this careful handling. Edna didn't realize that this man who had brought her so much pain last night had another more gentle side to him. Besides, the saddle Edna was sitting on now reminded her of last night. It would be better if they rode separate horses, because every bump from the ground vibrates through her body, and the slight scent in the air. If she rode separately, she could feel it all. Edna wonders if she'll ever be able to go somewhere very far away, where no one can find her. At some point, Edna finds herself in a town where people live in total poverty. Children have nothing to eat, and adults walk around not knowing what to do with themselves. Alea tells her that before the end of the war, these lands were devoid of any soldiers, and during the war, the criminals looted and destroyed the place. Even so, it's much worse than Elijah imagined. There's no chance of grass growing on this land. If only someone had taken care of this land. But it seems these people have been abandoned. They probably won't find the dress here. Edna says it's all right, and she doesn't need a dress because she prefers freedom of movement to aristocratic silk. The girl realizes that she needs to help these poor people and clean up this town. Edna doesn't want people to suffer, and it is important for her to help people like her, simple, innocent, ordinary people. People are asking, are there any guests in this musty town? And they are asking for help because all their food has run out in 3 days. Edna remembers that she once stood in this place, and this town, and this land. It was a rich and beautiful place. Elijah says that this land was neglected until the war ended. Edna can't hold back her emotions and begins to cry, seeing how bad it is for the people around her. Edna thinks that this is partly her fault, and she decides that she needs to help the poor people to cope with all the unpleasantness that surrounds them. Edna decides that instead of buying a wedding dress, she should buy food for these poor people. Elijah looks at Edna acting strangely and realizes that there's something wrong with this girl. First of all, Elijah notices that Edna is very quick to dismount, and that is not what ordinary women usually do. It is usually very difficult for a girl to dismount without training. Also, Elijah notices that in talking to her, he felt pride and strength and intelligence and thinking. Elijah has strange feelings and some suspicions about this girl. Although it's only Eli's intuition, but he's always relied on his intuition, so he's been able to avoid many dangers in his past life. Eli is up to something and doesn't know if he should take Edna's word for it. He says that his subordinates are coming in a few days. Elijah tells him that they left to search for their family members after settling here. Elijah would like to prepare for winter with them, but he doesn't know where to start. There is a lot of work here, and the people are all hungry and have no means of subsistence. Elijah says he can't do anything for these lands. Edna is amazed. What can Mr. Elijah say? But he tells her that he doesn't want the rights of a lord, so he won't be responsible for these lands. Gomen begins to stir among the people. The people are worried that they have been abandoned and no one will look after them. The people have been starving for a long time. Duke says Edna that as she could notice soon, winter will start. In addition, with the subordinates and their families, it is impossible to freeze all the people in this city. Edna says that Elijah is truly mad if he decides he can sacrifice people, but Elijah says he can't do it on his own. So if Edna has any good ideas, she can try. Edna realizes that Elijah is giving her the right to try to help these people, and she will take full advantage of it. But still, Edna gets upset and tells Eli that a simple woman has no way to save the poor people, and if she acts rashly, she'll be found out. Elijah says he can help Edna if she tells him everything, what she's keeping from him, because Elijah knows that Edna is an unusual girl. Edna realizes that if she's discovered, she'll be killed and never get a second chance. Only these poor people make the girl really hope she can help them. Elijah says that when the wedding ceremony begins, a wedding dress will be required. But Edna says she doesn't need a wedding dress. She wants a name instead, as Eli's wife. Edna will be able to do whatever she wants. Elijah sees the look in the girl's eyes and realizes that those eyes can see through people like burning sparks and like the rising sun or bright shining stars. Elijah is struck by the girl's beauty, and there is a desperate but at the same time calmness in her eyes. Elijah can't keep his hands off and touches Edna, for that look was then that night. The man sees how Edna tensed at his touch and that Edna is obviously afraid. Elijah knew that Edna was afraid of him too, and he's getting more and more curious. Because she has that look in her eye. It can make you feel hot and cold. Elijah says they can go to their wedding because there must be a church somewhere in this vast wasteland. Elijah turns to Edna and says that God bless them and he shouldn't cling to everything. Edna thinks such language is rude enough to speak of a higher power. Edna looks up at the sky and realizes that it's about to rain. Meanwhile, somewhere in the church in the wasteland sits a watcher that realizes about the suitable Eli that will soon be here. The monks meet Eli and greet the Lord. The people look quite poor and starved. It is a monastery, and the name of the head priest is Roger. The old man says the whole place is going to collapse. After all, they have already been holding on for the last few days almost completely without food. This earth is empty, and there are hardly any people left, and the land has become barren. The old man says that this is the price of their sins, and they are angry at heaven for putting them through this hardship. But the priest is more interested in what brought Mr. Eli here. Eli says he was planning to get married and wants to ask Roger for the ceremony. The old man looks at Mr. Alea with an uncomprehending look. Elijah smiles and says that if Roger has the strength to stand, he can bless them. Roger says that of course a wedding can certainly be arranged for them, and Roger is just an old man who will do his best to support them. But Roger, in return, asks that the gentlemen also do something for their rundown monastery, which hasn't been visited for a long time. The place has truly become a hot spot. Elijah asks what Roger would like, and the old man replies that the means to rebuild the monastery, although they are followers of God, they must have something to eat and somewhere to live. Alea immediately draws his sword and attacks the shepherd. The next moment, Roger's cheek is cut by Alea's stunning blow, and blood is flying in all directions. Eli asks Roger, does he really want to raise funds from this village where people are now poor? Alea presents his sword to Roger and says that he has been in many battles and has seen men like Roger, amidst the bloody carnage of the screams of men and many deaths. The lock on the gates of your monasteries is just a shameless thing of your so-called God. Elijah means that the monastery never helped the people, but only demanded taxes from them. Alea says with anger that he sees the condition of the people in the village, and Roger wants to ask for donations. What does he think he's doing? Does Roger really think that Elijah will pay even 1 penny to such insolent people as Roger? Edna says that's right, doesn't she? After she ran away, she had nowhere to go and asked for help at the convent. But the monks refused to help Edna. They sold Edna to gangsters as some kind of prostitute. And when Anna visited the convent, these people gave her a better room. Edna realizes that this is a superficial faith. And while children starve in the streets and sick people abound, priests ignore people. Edna presses her lips together and doesn't understand how these priests can be servants of God if they are truly the spawn of hell. Edna tells the Lord to calm down. She realizes that Elijah is right, but probably because of the long war, these people are still too hungry, and it's not a question of selfishness, because in the face of hunger, everyone is equal. If Elijah kills the monk, the cardinal will prosecute him. In front of the cardinal, even the king won't help Eli. They are God's servants. Edna asks Eli not to anger these foolish men. They don't deserve to die by Mr. Eli's blade. Edna realizes that Eli must not kill them. He must realize that committing such a crime will do no good for the Lord. They are in a situation where they can get a lot of trouble from the death of the priests. Alea hides her sword, and Edna finally sighs. The girl turns to the priests and smiles sweetly. Tomorrow, she will send all the necessary provisions and materials, so Edna wants to ask the priests to distribute the provisions to all the people in the village. The priests start smiling and say that let Edna love God because it is a really kind lady. But the next moment, Edna threatens the priests and says that she will watch them and asks them not to forget about it because otherwise she will not stop Eli. Then even Edna won't think about the cardinal. Edna says that the Lord's steward will also keep an eye on the monastery's activities, so let the priests not get cocky and do as they're told. The priest is truly frightened of this lady who looks like a real demon that has risen from hell to take sinners with her. This lady knows what she is saying and will order people to be killed without a doubt of conscience. A short time later, Roger, from a cut on his face in a completely broken church, performs a ceremony for the lovers. Roger reads the necessary text and after a while states that the ceremony can be completed and now Elijah and Edna are officially husband and wife until death. Elijah notices after the ceremony that the sky has turned gloomy and it will rain soon. They have to hurry in order to escape before the storm arrives. Edna turns to look at the town, which used to be populous and prosperous. She asks them to wait for her, for she will restore the place to its former beauty. Elijah rides the horse with Edna and realizes something of the way Edna spoke in the church. This is not something she could learn as a servant to a noble woman. It's not so easy because it's not just knowing what to say. The tone of her voice, And the posture, the speech, the expression on her face, and that look in her eyes all require a high level of education that you can't get as a maid. Edna held herself with such dignity that any mistress would envy her. Elijah wonders who Edna is. This mysterious girl amazes Elijah more and more every day. The next moment, it starts to rain. The horse starts to neigh from the cold. There's a risk of the horse slipping on the mud and falling. A lot of people die from falling off a horse, and it's no joke. It's pouring, so it's dangerous to ride the horse further up, so they have to go down. Elijah takes Edna in his arms and says there's a hunting cave nearby. They can wait out the rain there. Wet and frozen, the couple tries to start a fire in the cave. Elijah shows his skills, and with the help of 2 stones, he manages to start a fire. The boys are warming themselves around the fire. Elijah tells Edna that if he were alone, he would have returned to the castle long ago, and that his wife is a lot of trouble. Edna apologizes and says it's her fault, but even so, the Lord could have fallen off his horse because of the mud and slippery ground. Elijah says that Edna is right, and though Elijah tried to make it look smarter that girls always bring only one trouble, but Edna is truly right that there would be many chances for Eli to fall off the horse. After a while, Edna sneezes, and Eli wonders, does the girl have a cold? Alea tells Edna not to just sit there, but to hurry up and take off her clothes. Edna remembers the previous night when this is where the unpleasant events started. But Alea turns away and tells the girl not to worry, and he won't do anything like that. Fortunately, Alea realizes that the bandits have not had time to get to this place because there is a blanket there. While their clothes are drying, they can warm themselves under the blankets. Edna is hesitant to do that, but Elijah says he doesn't want to be the hero of a tragedy if his wife dies of fever on their wedding night. So Elijah wants Edna to take off her clothes, or he will. Edna agrees and decides to undress. Elijah sees the scars on the girl's back. Elijah understands now why Edna didn't want to take off her clothes. Edna was trying to hide her scars that speak of her murky past. Elijah throws over herself and Edna the blanket that were hidden in this place. Edna thanks Eli and realizes that the Duke wanted the best. Edna realizes that when she's around him, she feels like the person she used to be. It's like her pride is back, as well as her confidence in the future. Edna thought she was ready to let go of her past when she was Eden. The previous king, Duquesne III, was a ruthless tyrant. He changed laws he didn't like, took all the women he wanted, and exploited people shamelessly. If he didn't like something or got bored with it, he'd just throw it away, and his queens were no exception. The first queen gave up her life, the second was banished back to her homeland. And Duquesne married a 3rd time, Princess Queen Beowald Cecil. This woman is Edna's mother. Edna recalls that there was an incident of girls who came up to her and asked, "Didn't Prince Eden see the roses in full bloom, even though winter was coming?" Then Edna smiled and said that indeed this is amazing news. The flowers must have confused the seasons when they saw beautiful girls like them. The kingdom of Oswald and the 3rd Queen Cecil. She lost the king's favor as soon as she married. He no longer honored her and put her with his mistresses. The queen spent all her time in her room. Her life hung in the balance. Only the child in her womb was the queen's hope. A son who would be the king's sole heir. He was the only chance to ensure Cecil's safety and preserve her status. But unfortunately, a princess was born, not a prince. The moment Cecil held her daughter in her arms and felt her warmth, that the midwives should never tell anyone that a daughter had been born. Cecil gave birth to a prince. Cecil decided to hide the truth about the baby's gender. The princess's life was boring and passive. No matter how smart and talented she was valued only for her obedience and beauty. And to defend her family's honor, she was married off to some old pervert. Such a life completely exhausted Cecil. The queen won't let her daughter live that life. And when this mad king dies, Edna will ascend to the throne, and that's the only hope for survival in this castle. Cecil says that Edna has the right to call her a bad mother. From this point on, Edna's life as Eden is just beginning. The prince's education was strictly supervised by Queen Cecil. Cecil decided to make all the days hard and tiring, but Eden was a smart and talented child. So the trials of being a Prince Eden passed with ease. With some time passing, 16 years passed. Edna grew up to be an excellent swordsman, and no one could compete with her. The next time Edna won a duel, she was greeted with applause. Mom said she heard Edna win against Sir Derek. More specifically, Edna said he was just lucky. Cecil says that there is no need to be modest, and that the best knight is known for his swordsmanship skills, and if Edna defeated such an opponent, it means that her skills are on the same level with him or higher. However, Edna can't win by strength alone, and they have to find a way to compensate for that. Mom hopes that Edna will make up for it in training, even though Mom wasn't finished, but the girl knew what Cecil was going to say now. Mom says that Edna must not forget that she is a woman, but no one must know about it, and her real name is Edna, but no one must know about that name. One day, Edna will be able to rule these lands as a woman, but no one must know this secret until then. For her father will never forgive them. Edna must realize that. From that day on, Edna couldn't sleep well. Edna had to train with the sword, learn history, and practice foreign languages. Edna had to learn many different sciences, as well as just walking the streets, eating, and even breathing. She had to do everything and live like Prince Eden. It was a desperate struggle for Edna's survival. She started taking medicine to hinder her growth as a woman, but it wasn't enough. She was even more tormented when she had to tighten the bandages around her breasts, which continued to grow. One day, Mama said that Duquesne had a terrible disease, and rumor has it that syphilis has already developed in his head, so Duquesne won't last long. Edna asks, "Does Mama mean it will soon be her time to rule these lands?" And Mama replies that her daughter is quite right. Edna will be crowned and never have to pretend to be a man again. Though Edna has expected these words all her life, she couldn't understand. Noble girls who obey the wishes of their families, and Edna who pretends to be a prince to her mother's wishes. Edna couldn't understand how she was different from these noble girls who also obeyed the rules of their families and had no decision to make about choosing her own path. A servant comes to Duquesne and says that everything is taking a serious turn, and the noble and simple Ludes are not happy even in the main city. There is a revolt, so the servant asks to listen to them. Duquesne smiles grimly and laughs. The man says, "What are you afraid of his butler? Because this town and castle are guarded by hundreds of knights who have sworn to serve the king faithfully, and even if there is a rebellion, they'll just kill all the rebels. The king is truly terrible, and he doesn't value human life." The girls are amazed, pretending to call His Majesty a real hero. At one point, a servant runs up to the king and shouts for the king's attention. Duquesne asks the servant how dare he raise his voice in the presence of the king. The servant asks him to forgive him because the matter is too urgent. The rebellion begins. Duquesne shakes and is pierced by a vague suspicion that no matter how much he enjoys his sinful life, sooner or later, death will take him. The servant says the leader of the rebels is the second son of the McGregor family. It's Caden McGregor. Edna realized that her 16th winter was beginning. Edna got the news that the war had already started. Her mother tried to reassure her daughter not to go into battle. But the girl was really stubborn, for Edna had the necessary fighting skills to give the necessary support to the warriors. But Cecil said she had already sent a secret message to the Biowald. Reinforcements would be arriving in 2 or 3 weeks. When the soldiers arrived, they would go straight to the Biowald. Once they cross the border, Caden won't be able to reach them, and there they can think of their next move. Edna asked her mom, "Does she mean Edna should run away? Duquesne has no power or authority as king. He has failed. Cecil hopes he can hold out until they leave. Mother says there's no hope for this town anymore, and Cecil can't let Edna die here." Edna realizes that all the time she has been pretending to be Eden in front of the whole kingdom in order to ascend the throne sooner or later has been for nothing. For Edna is now abandoning her country and her people and what 15 years of living as Eden will mean. Edna doesn't know if she has the right to take the throne after leaving this country, whether she can forgive herself. And what if she and her mother can't return to the capital and Eden is no longer needed for her or for the queen's survival? Then what will become of Eden as well as Edna? 2 different personalities and both alien to Edna, and no one can help her answer those questions. Some time has passed and Edna's 16th birthday has arrived. One of the dukes asks to accept his congratulations, and they were supposed to open the palace gates and invite all the inhabitants to celebrate the prince's birthday. But the duke apologizes for not being able to do so. Eden replies that he knows the reason why they can't afford such decisions, and he is still grateful that everyone is here to celebrate with the prince on this day, despite the hard times. Eden says that sometimes it is hard, but they will prevail if they fight together. Mom looks at Eden and asks if he is okay. Most likely her daughter is tired. Edna says she is still full of strength, but the soldiers outside are risking their lives guarding the castle gates, while Edna is here, security having fun at the banquet. It's hard for Edna to stand with her head held up proudly, and she burns with shame. Her mother understands and says it's a very good thing if her daughter understands to love and cherish her subjects. Still, sometimes a ruler must have fun. If they show weakness, then the people will become wary and lose faith in them. Cecil says that if entertainment is the only thing a ruler does, then one day he as ruler will fail and destroy his kingdom like Edna's father. The girl must always think of the people who follow her. The daughter, with a serious look, says that she will take all these words to heart. At one point, the king comes in, staggering and drunk. Duquesne says he was resting in his chambers when he heard the news of his son Eden's birthday. Duquesne couldn't sit there quietly on such a day. Edna thanks her father and yet is a bit flustered by his presence. The drunken father now says that he might even give a speech on such a joyous day. The man is truly scary. Duquesne asks his son if he can hear screams from afar. Edna doesn't understand what Duquesne wants to ask her now, but the king asks if Edna can hear the clatter of hooves, for they are closing in. Duquesne laughs with madness and says that he hears his son's death approaching, for Eden will not live and will no longer see the light of day. Edna realizes that Duquesne is getting crazier by the day. Rumors begin to spread around the palace that Sir Edgar was executed after yesterday's audience. Also, the siege has been going on for a month, but the king has yet to appear on the battlefield. The morale of the soldiers is falling. It's true that yesterday the king had no plan. He still drinks and sleeps with women every day, not caring about this rebellion. It seems the king doesn't care at all about the people who are dying in this war, and the king has abdicated his responsibilities as leader. The people believe that this is the end, and they can't rely on the rotting rope to save themselves. At some point, the guards at the gate are visited by men disguised in the regular guards' uniforms. The guard at the gate asks, "Is it time for the shift change?" And the men say that it is not yet, and they are a little early, so they ask the guard to keep it a secret from the commander. The guys thank their helpers for deciding to come early, so they go to bed. But it turns out that they are not real guards, but intruders who decided to open the gate to let the rioters inside. After a while, a maid bursts in and warns Cecil that the gate has been opened, and now the rebels are entering the city to destroy the king's forces. Cecil wonders, why does the maid enter at such a late hour? But when she wakes up, she realizes what the maid is saying. The rebels are filling the king's palace, and already Duquesne has been beheaded. The palace is about to be overrun, and Cecil must flee. Cecil asks the maid about Biowald, but the maid replies that he has abandoned her. Cecil realizes that this is the end for her, and she has endured all this time to end up like this. But in the next moment, the mistress remembers that she has a daughter who can prolong her lineage, and this may be Cecil's last hope. The queen asks where Prince Eden is, and the maid replies that His Highness has very little time now, and must hurry. Cecil shouts and tells the woman to be quiet as she is the queen here. Cecil asks, does the maid really think the rebels will calm down when they see the queen in the noose? When they find all the members of the royal family, no one can escape being killed, not even Edna. But Edna could escape. The only people who knew Edna were her and Ophelia. The queen herself killed everyone who was present at the birth. But how fast can Edna escape the palace? Cecil realizes that Edna is the only one who can survive and runs to her daughter's aid to save her life, for no one else can escape but her. The mother takes her child and says that Edna should take off her clothes immediately, but the girl doesn't understand why she should do it because there are many people around. Cecil says that it must be done immediately to save Edna's life. But Edna doesn't understand why her mother is now calling her by a woman's name, and on top of that, her mother has to leave through the secret passages while Edna protects her. Mom says that Edna is the only one who can save herself and says her name loudly for all to hear. So Mommy tells Edna to hurry up and give up her clothes. Mom says Edna can survive and watch from the sidelines. As events unfold and in the future, she will be able to use her knowledge and power to climb the throne again. So Mom holds out the dress to Edna and says that she will watch from the sidelines as Caden rules and drenches the throne in people's blood, and now the only task Edna has to do is to survive and become a normal woman outside of this castle. Mom says her daughter is very cunning and can do it alone. On top of that, Mom says that tonight, Edna will die in this castle, so no one would hesitate to see Eden's sword next to her body. Cecil realizes that because of her ambition, Edna couldn't live her life as her own. Cecil killed all those people and sacrificed the life of her child, and it was all done for something meaningless that eventually just collapsed. Mom admits that she was a complete fool. Mom apologizes to Edna for everything she caused. So Mom pushes her daughter out of the palace through the secret passage, then closes it. Edna knocks and tries to get Mom to open the doors and let her back in. Cecil doesn't hear her daughter and hands her sword that belonged to Edna to the man who will act as Edna's corpse. Cecil realizes that Edna will probably be angry with her. She feels her daughter's warmth for the first time and realizes that she can't just leave it like that and that she has to fight to the end. Cecil also realizes that she will receive her punishment in hell, but no one must know that the heir to the throne survived. As Edna's family burns in the fire, the girl peels off her hands trying to open the door. At that moment, Edna swore to protect the weak, as Cecil swore to protect her daughter even if it costs 1,000 lives. Edna nervously drags herself in her blanket, trying to keep warm by the fire that slightly illuminates the walls of the cave. The girl has bad dreams from her past when she was Edna, and the moment when her mother burns with all the servants in the castle that used to be Edna's home. Elijah notices that the girl has gotten sick in her sleep. At some point, Edna starts to get up and sees the flickering of the fire. She starts to act strangely, and the blanket falls off the young girl. Edna feels that her dreams are getting scarier and scarier each time. Edna looks at the blazing bonfire that is burning as if those people are burning, and screams start to sound in her head. The girl remembers Edna from when she was still Eden, that incredibly intense fire, when the girl could hear her mom dying behind the wall as well as her friends. Edna can't get out of her mind the memories that come to her every night in horrible dreams. Edna really wants to save herself, but she can't help it because you can't change the past, especially if it was tragic. The girl starts to push herself off the ground, and seeing Alea reacting to her jerk, Edna warns Alea not to touch her. Edna extends her hands towards the fire and asks for her mom to take the girl with her. But Eli tries to hold on to Edna, who seems to have lost all self-control, and tries to jump into the fire and screams that she should be with the people who died in that fire. Alea tries to stop the girl, who is trying with all her might to escape to the burning fire. Edna starts crying and screaming for her mom to take her with her. Elijah doesn't understand if Edna has really started sleepwalking, so she tries to clean up the girl. Alea slaps Edna's face so that the girl finally wakes up. And when she wakes up, Elijah asks with a disgruntled look, "Did Edna want to die in the fire because he found out this information when Edna was talking nonsense in her sleep?" The next moment, Edna is upset that Elijah spanked her, and yet Elijah said earlier that it will not happen again when she becomes his wife. Elijah says that Edna must be awake. Elijah goes on to say that if Edna is awake, then let her get dressed. The rain is over and Elijah doesn't wake her up, but when she wakes up, she can go back to the castle. Elijah says that the sun will be going down soon if they stay any longer. They will have to spend the night here, so they have to hurry. Edna says she agrees with Elijah, so she goes to her dry clothes to get dressed. Edna asks herself at this point, did she really talk in her sleep and even try to jump into the fire? Edna clenches her teeth and doesn't realize that did her past affect her future so much, because it turns out that Edna relaxed, even though she was unconscious but tried to kill herself. Edna must remember the past, and remember the screams that echoed from the other side of the wall on that terrible and evil night when the rebels set fire to the people in the castle. Edna realizes her pain and loss. In order to save Edna, many people had to sacrifice their lives, and out of them were many innocent and good people who did not deserve to die such a horrible death. Edna must pull herself together and swear that she will not give up and will live a long and happy life. Her mother's last wish before she died was for her daughter to live. Edna will try to fulfill her mother's wish. Alea and Edna go into the palace, and the man says that Ravel has prepared lunch. But when they get to the castle, Alea thinks he will starve to death because he was incredibly tired after the adventure. Elijah asks that Edna must be sleepy after all that has happened today, so she suggests they go to their common room. But Edna says, to get a good night's sleep, maybe she should go to her room. Elijah stops and turns to Edna and asks what the girl is referring to now since he doesn't understand her. Edna looks at Elijah a little surprised, and Elijah goes on to say that Edna must have forgotten because they got married today, and now Elijah is her duke, and she is a duchess. Now Edna suggests that the dukes sleep in separate beds on their wedding night. Has Edna forgotten what she said that night when she told Elijah to wait a little longer? Edna blushes and says that there was a previous night that could be considered the first wedding night. And now Edna doesn't even know what to say. Elijah says that was when they weren't married yet, so that night is irrelevant. Edna is truly shocked and doesn't know how to express herself properly. Elijah says that Edna was incredibly angry. And even if they were forced into this marriage, Elijah doesn't plan on just being called a husband, because Edna is the one who insists on it. Elijah remembers Edna's face and says that she was willing to fulfill her duties as a wife, like a slave in exchange for the title of duchess. Edna is upset and agrees to go along with Elijah since she has nowhere else to go. Edna says she will put up with all this, and in turn she will demand something from Eli. Elijah really flinches at Edna's words because she just said patience, and Elijah knows his guilt to Edna because he was very careless with her last night. Edna says that Alea must keep his word that he can give her all the rights and privileges that a duchess deserves. Alea smiles and says, Edna, you don't have to worry about that because he always keeps his word. Alea kisses his duchess and the latter blushes with excitement. The girl shudders and touches Eli's face, where the man is truly amazed by the girl's tenderness. Alea doesn't understand for what reason when he looks into this girl's eyes he feels embarrassed. Alea feels the warmth of Edna and does not realize who she really is. Duchess Edna skillfully controls Alea, and now he is in full power of this girl who really took possession of his soul. After intimacy, Eli says that from now on, Edna will only sleep in his bed, whether he's here or Eli isn't. The man is sure Edna despises the idea of sharing a bed with a man like him, but she says she will tolerate it. Edna turns to Eli and says that she meant she would tolerate the pain, because it hurt when they first had intimacy. The man gets upset because he knows his mistake and asks how Edna felt this time. Edna fidgets on his arm and embarrassedly says that it didn't hurt as much this time. Edna remembers that it was very different that night. But the next night was very different, and Elijah was not rough with her, but he was gentle and attentive. It was like he was holding someone very dear to him. Edna is really embarrassed to recall the events of the previous night. She thought it meant that she felt what it was like to be loved as a woman. And it's not the same powerlessness Edna felt as a maid. She's feeling those feelings again as Edna. But Edna thinks it's only natural that she should go on with her life. Being a normal woman, and every day when she pretended to be Eden, the girl was truly tormented. But since she left the castle, she never imagined that the burden that had served to keep her alive could finally be said goodbye. Elijah has given Edna the title of Duchess, and he accepts her as his wife. If Edna stays with him, she will raise her child and take care of him and move on with her life. Edna remembers all those poor people who suffered from hunger and mook. She realizes that she doesn't need to get carried away because she made a promise to rebuild the ruined city that her father destroyed. Everything collapsed while Edna and her mother sat and dreamed, waiting for their turn on the throne. Edna realizes that Elijah is quick on the uptake and has common sense and is observant. The knowledge that will be needed to revitalize this land is far more than a common servant who has been trained for too short a time. Of course, Edna will be careful, but at worst, she will be killed if her identity is revealed. Edna apologizes to her dead mother, who wanted more than anything for her daughter to survive. Edna realizes that ever since she ran away, after giving up her name, her title, her country, her people, surviving has only brought more pain for Edna. Edna felt like she was burning from the inside out every day as she hid her identity and ran away from all her problems. Edna held on to a piece of her guilt and thought her life no longer made sense. Edna has finally found a reason to move on. She will not live for just one life, but will give her all for the good of the people. Edna no longer wants to run away like she did before. She will fight and fight for her people and her people who believe in her, no matter what it takes. But she will not give up and run away. She will die. But even so, she'll die with a clear conscience that she's done everything she can to rebuild this land. Edna comes to the maid named Rovel. She asks how the maid slept, and after finding out that the girl is doing well, Edna decides to ask the maid for a favor, since it is the least she can do to pay for her sins to the people. Elijah wakes up after a stormy night and sees that Edna is not in bed with him. The man jumps up sharply from the bed and realizes that he felt cheated again because such an experienced soldier could not feel the girl get out of bed, even if she was lying next to him. Elijah is surprised that Edna even prepared all his clothes and set out his sword. Elijah doesn't understand how Edna was able to do all these things so silently, because during the war, Elijah trained his body, and one of his habits is to always stay alert. That means Elijah couldn't let himself relax even when he slept, but he couldn't wake up, with Edna by his side. Elijah doesn't understand why he didn't wake up. The Duke realizes that if Edna were a normal person, then maybe everything would be all right. But noticing all the strange behavior of the girl, he concludes that Edna has some kind of secret. The next moment, Elijah hears some sounds, and it turns out that now Edna has gathered a huge amount of supplies and people that serve in the castle of Mr. Elijah. Edna says that she is grateful to everyone who has come to her to help her. In addition to the people who came from the castle, there were also a great number of people from the village and the monastery that happened to be nearby. Edna says that she is sure the road was dangerous after yesterday's rain, so once again she thanks all those present. Edna points out that the men can take all the supplies they need and load them into the carts. Edna also says that the women who can work Edna calls them to follow Rovel into the kitchen. Edna says they need to feed many, so we'll need lots of bread. Roger says he needs to interrupt my lady and apologizes for his insolence. The elder says that even if Edna feeds the starving with supplies from the castle, what will they all do after that? As Edna knows, they have no way of repaying the debt for all those supplies. An old man named Roger asks if Edna can guarantee that the villagers will not become hostages in exchange for these supplies. Edna can see that the old man's hands are trembling. He doesn't try to give away his fear, though. The Duchess remembers that she scared the old man to death that time and realizes that this man, despite what he said yesterday, he still cares for the people of this village. The elder has the courage to speak up for the people of the village. Edna is happy that the man was able to change and says that the elder may not worry about this issue. Edna says that the Lord knows that no one has properly taken care of the land because of the long war. Elia knows very well that all these people have suffered attacks and plunder, and so Edna has summoned all the people to the castle. It would be nice to distribute the supplies through the monastery, but Edna thought it would be better to show the Lord's determination to help all the people of this land. Edna says that the Lord will decide what happens next, so at least today there should be no worries, and people can safely take the supplies as aid. It is the Lord's duty to take care of his lands, Edna points out, where the bread will be baked, and also indicates where the man will carry the supplies. The Duke comes out of his room and sees Edna handling his castle supplies. Alea realizes how Edna wanted to use her title in exchange for marriage, and with Alea. Alea sees Edna smiling and is surprised. After all, he has never seen such a sincere mistress before. It turns out that Edna takes real pleasure in helping all these people. The next moment, Elijah comes to Mistress and all the other people. Elijah says it's a good job emptying the barn and doing it all in the morning. Elijah says he has a very diligent wife and she is already working so hard. And the wedding was just yesterday. Did Edna overdo it? Edna apologizes to Alea and says that she didn't mean to make so much noise, so she was worried that she might have woken up the Lord. Alea says that the noise was more than enough to wake up all the people in the neighboring town. Edna realizes that Alea is joking again, and he can't even look her in the eye out of embarrassment. Alea also says he's pretty sure he only gave the title to the girl yesterday, and she's already taken inventory of all the provisions. Alea is amazed at Edna's speed in handling her duties so quickly. Edna looks at a smiling Eli and says that Ravel helped her out so she wasn't alone, but still Edna sees that look in Eli's eyes and she is used to it. Edna imagines it's as if the eyes of a seasoned warrior are evaluating and checking every inch of her body. The Duke is a little intimidating and makes her wonder if the girl is safe, because only a beast would look at its prey with such an appraising gaze that it would fall into its toothy mouth. Edna realizes that Elijah suspects her past if he is so suspicious of her. The Duke looks more and more suspicious, and clearly he is not unaware of the oddities of his new mistress, who turns out to be no ordinary maid but something more. Edna expected Alea, as a skilled warrior, to realize that Edna's movements are unusual. She's also good at controlling people. But Edna is disappointed that Alea realized it sooner than she thought. It would be better if the Duke suspected the oddities in his wife later, when Edna has successfully helped these lands and her death will be for a reason. Edna realizes that what is more important is that the people have finally found faith, and now they are scared, so the girl must do something. Edna tells Alea that Ravel is in the kitchen, and the gentleman is probably hungry, so Edna orders Alea to bring breakfast. Alea notices that the people who looked worried are now relieved, after Edna's words. Apparently, Mistress has a knack for setting people straight. Her abilities as a born leader make the Duchess a warlord who leads her people into a confident future where everything will work out and they will be able to defeat all troubles. Yesterday, all these people would have been consumed by despair and disillusionment and resigned to their lot in life. Alea realizes that people who were in such a bad situation would not have been able to break free from this vicious circle on their own. They knew that Alea had left this land, and the people know that their master doesn't care even after seeing the destruction in their city. But now Elijah realizes that all these people are relying on Edna for a better future because the mistress will help them. Get off their knees. Even though Edna became Duchess yesterday, people trust her. It's interesting that Edna showed her leadership skills then. And she is also skilled at dismounting from her horse and silently getting up in the morning and organizing large numbers of people. Edna has only been in this palace for a week and every day. Eli has more and more questions. Elijah is incredibly excited to finally find out who this girl really is, because his blood is stirring at the thought that sooner or later this secret will be revealed. Alea takes Edna's hands and sees that people have all stopped waiting to hear what the Lord has to say. Elijah tells the people not to stand still, but to do what their mistress tells them to do. Elijah says that if people are idle, he will close the gates of the castle. People from the words of the Lord became incredibly terrified and began to shake with fear and do their work faster. Edna sees how the Lord's words affected the people and realizes that now the people are really scared from his words. Edna doesn't understand. Why Eli? All this is doing Edna has done everything well, but has she made a mistake somewhere and Eli has a suspicion? Edna senses Eli's confidence. Edna sees Eli taking her to his room. Does he really want to test his theory there? Edna senses that she is the only one in this castle he can test. Edna doesn't want it to end this way, so Edna asks her mom to help her. Duke Eli is different from the other nobles, of course not only by his origins but most of all by his eyes, as expected of a war hero. The atmosphere around him is different. And when he first met the maids, Rovel, who is not the first time she has served the lords of this castle, was truly frightened. Now there's the lady Alea married yesterday. She's the daughter of a noble family, very proud and picky and doesn't care what her servants do. But it turns out that my lady is here to help the common people. When she sees that their hands are not enough, and she has already assessed the state of these lands and immediately distributed all the supplies. The maid realizes that my lady is a good enough girl and she likes to serve this lady. Edna is a very kind and responsible mistress who will bring warmth and comfort to these lands. People hope that the Duchess will be able to bring happiness and wealth so that the people live and prosper. Everyone wants to see such a mistress in charge because she looks confident and strong at the same time honest and loving to the people. When Alea went into his room with Edna, the people began to talk to each other. Is the Lord against distributing these materials and supplies? Then what should the people do? People are worried about the Duchess and don't know if she will be all right because she is very kind. The next moment, Alea is in her room pointing a sword at Edna's throat and asks her, "Is Edna really just a simple servant girl?" Edna realizes that she needs to be as calm as possible at this moment, and if she says one wrong word, she is finished, because his suspicions will only grow if she rushes to justify herself. Elijah realizes that this woman is not just a good talker. More important is that she has a way with her words that allows him to trust her. Sometimes she is stern, and sometimes she is gentle, as if she knows what people want to hear. Elijah is amazed by Edna's skills that can't belong to an ordinary maid. Elijah realizes that she is clearly no ordinary maid, so he demands that Edna tell him who she really is. The man can no longer stay in the fog of deceit. He needs to know the truth. Otherwise, there is no point in marrying a girl that cannot even tell about her past. The Duke wants Edna to be honest with him, and only then will he be able to trust her. The Duchess asks, "Does it really matter now?" Edna from the sword that is leaning against her neck and says, "What? Is it really that important for the Lord to hear this if he dragged her here in front of the eyes of all those people?" Edna stares stubbornly at Eli, not wanting to give up so easily. Edna has done a lot to survive, so she's not going to just let it go. Former prince, then exiled princess, and eventually she becomes a servant girl who is married to a duke, which automatically makes her a duchess. Edna says that Elijah must know that his men are afraid of the Lord and something must be done about it. After all, it can't go on like this. Edna, with a stubbornness in her eyes while not showing fear of the sharp blade at her throat, says that even if Alea doesn't want to save the men, he must provide them with supplies at least until they can take away their fear and have faith in Alea. That's what's most important right now. Edna realizes that the truth hidden in the lies is what she needs to keep him from figuring it out. And now Edna needs the truth. Edna says the Duke asked her if she was really just a servant girl. Edna replies that she wasn't just a maid in the castle because she was only a maid. Edna says that she was beaten because she was not used to hard work and had to run away from the soldiers who tried to rape her every night. And when they found Edna, they beat her again, and no one in the castle helped the girl to escape from the angry soldiers. Edna says that for a hopeless girl like her, it was the only life she was given. Edna clenches her fists and says that's why she wants to help these people, because Edna has seen what fear is like, and hunger and endless despair. She knows all about it. But if Elijah doubts Edna because of that, she can do whatever she wants to her. Elijah really flinches at the girl's words. Apparently, Cecil's upbringing had really paid off, and Edna was a masterful speaker. Edna was no match for a formidable warrior like Eli, who had seen a lot in his life. Edna was a truly difficult opponent in uncovering the truth. Edna is truly the heiress that no one knows about, and her calling is to rule the entire kingdom, and she has been taught from childhood to be responsible for the people. But Alea does not know the whole truth and is masterfully deceived by the girl's words.